Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 215th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when the ship sped on her course, Kamar al-Zaman returned to the garden in cark and care. But anon he rented the place of its owner, and hired a man to help him in irrigating the trees. Moreover, he repaired the trap-door, and he went to the underground chamber, and bringing the rest of the gold to grass, stowed it in another 50 bottles, which he filled up with a layer of olives. Then he inquired of the ship, and they told him that it sailed but once a year. At which his trouble of mind redoubled, and he cried sore for that which had betided him, above all for the loss of the Princess Budur's talisman, and spent his nights and days weeping and repeating verses. Such was his case. But as regards the ship, she sailed with a favoring wind till she reached the Ebony Islands. Now, by decree of destiny, Queen Budur was sitting at a lattice window overlooking the sea, and saw the galley cast anchor upon the strand. At this sight her heart throbbed, and she took horse with the chamberlains and nabobs, and riding down to the shore, halted by the ship, whilst the sailors broke bulk, and bore the bales to the storehouses. After which she called the captain to her presence, and asked him what he had with him. He answered, O king, I have with me in this ship aromatic drugs, and cosmetics, and healing powders, and ointments, and plasters, and precious metals, and rich stuffs, and rugs of Yemen leather, not to be borne of mule or camel, and all manners of odors, and spices, and perfumes, civet, and ambergris, and camphor, and Sumatra aloes wood, and tamarinds, and sparrow olives to boot, such as are rare to find in this country. When she heard talk of sparrow olives, her heart longed for them, as she said to the shipmaster, How much of olives hast thou? He replied, 50 bottles full, but their owner is not with us. So the king shall take what he will of them. Quoth she, Bring them ashore, that I may see them. Thereupon he called to the sailors, who brought her the 50 bottles, and she opened one, and looking at the olives, said to the captain, I will take the whole 50, and pay you their value, whatso it be. He answered, By Allah, O my lord, they have no value in our country. Moreover, their shipper tarried behind us, and he is a poor man. Asked she, And what are they worth here? And he answered, 1,000 dirhams. I will take them at 1,000, she said, and bade them carry the 50 bottles to the palace. When it was night, she called for a bottle of olives, and opened it. Thus, there being no one in the room but herself and the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, then placing a dish before her, she turned it into the contents of the jar, when there fell out into the dish with the olives a heap of red gold. She said to the lady Hafat al-Nus, This is not but gold. So she sent for the rest of the bottles, and found them all full of precious metals, and scarce enough olives to fill a single jar. Moreover, she sought among the gold, and found therein the talisman, which she took and examined, and behold, it was that which Kamar al-Zaman had taken from off her band of her petticoat trousers. Thereupon she cried out for joy, and slipped down in a swoon. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 216th night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when King Budur saw the talisman, she cried out for joy, and slipped down into a swoon. When she recovered, she said to herself, Verily, this talisman was the cause of my separation from my beloved Kamar al-Zaman, but now it is an omen of good. Then she showed it to Hayat al-Nufus, and said to her, This was the cause of disunion, and now, please Allah, it shall be the cause of my reunion. As soon as the day dawned, she seated herself on the royal throne, and sent for the shipmaster, who came into the presence, and kissed the ground before her. Quoth she, Where didst thou leave the owner of these olives? Quoth he, O king of the age, we left him in the land of the Magians, and he is a gardener there. She rejoined, Except thou bring him to me, knowest that harm which awaiteth thee and thy ship. Then she bade them seal up the magazines of the merchants, and said to them, Verily, the owner of these olives hath borrowed of me, and I have a claim upon him for debt. And unless you bring him to me, I will without fail do you all die and seize your goods. So they went to the captain, and promised him to hire of the ship if he would go and return a second time, saying, Deliver us from this masterful tyrant. Accordingly, the skipper embarked and set sail, and Allah decreed him a prosperous voyage, till he came to the island of the Magians, and landing by night, went up to the garden. Now the night was long upon Kamar al-Zaman, and he sat bethinking him of his beloved, and bewailing what had befallen him, versifying, A night whose stars refuse to run their course, a night of those who never seem outworn, like resurrection day of longsome length to him that watch and wait for the morn. Now at this moment the captain knocked at the garden gate, and Kamar al-Zaman opened and went out to him, whereupon the crew seized him, and went down with him on board the ship, and set sail forthright, and they ceased not voyaging days and nights, while Kamar al-Zaman knew not why they dealt thus with him. But when he questioned them, they replied, Thou hast offended against the Lord of the Ebony Island, the son-in-law of King Armanus, and thou hast stolen his monies. Miserable that thou art, said he. By Allah, I never entered that country, nor do I even know where it is. However, they fared on with him till they met the Ebony Islands, and landing, carried him up to the Lady Budur, who knew him at sight, and said, Leave him with the eunuchs, that they may take him to the bath. Then she relieved the merchants of the embargo, and gave the captain a robe of honor worth 10,000 pieces of gold. And after returning to the palace, she went in that night to the Princess Hayat al-Nufus, and told her what passed, saying, Keep thou my counsel till I accomplish my purpose, and do a deed which shall be recorded and shall be read by kings and commoners after we be dead and gone. And when she gave orders that they bear Kamar al-Zaman to the bath, they did so, and clad him in a royal habit, so that when he came forth, he resembled a willow bough or a star which shamed the greater and lesser light, and its glow and his life and soul returned to his frame. Then he repaired to the palace, and went into the Princess Budur, and when she saw him, she schooled her heart to patience, till she should have accomplished her purpose. And she bestowed on him mamelukes and eunuchs and camels and mules. Moreover, she gave him a treasury of money, and she ceased not advancing him from dignity to dignity, till she made him Lord High Treasurer, and committed to his charge all the treasures of the state. And she admitted him to the familiar favor, and acquainted the emirs with his rank and dignity. And all loved him, for Queen Budur did not cease day by day to increase his allowances. As for Kamar al-Zaman, he was at a loss and at the reason of her thus honoring him, and he gave gifts and largesse out of the abundance of the wealth, and he devoted himself to the service of King Armanus, so that the king and all the emirs and people, great and small, adored him, and were wont to swear by his life. Nevertheless, he never marveled at the honor and favor shown him by Queen Budur, and said to himself, By Allah, there needs must be a reason for this affection. Peradventure this king favored me not with these immoderate favors, save for some ill purpose, and therefore there is no help but that I crave leave of him to depart this realm. So he went in to Queen Budur, and said to her, O king, thou hast overwhelmed me with favors. But if thou wilt fulfill the measure of thy bounties, if thou wilt take from me all thou hast been pleased to bestow upon me, and permit me to depart. She smiled, and asked, What maketh thee seek to depart, and plunge into new perils, wherein thou art in the enjoyment and the highest of favor and greatest prosperity? Answered Kamar al-Zaman, O king, verily this favor, if there be no reason for it, it is indeed a wonder of wonders, more by token that thou hast advanced me to dignities such as befit men of age and experience, albeit I am, as it were, a young child. And Queen Budur rejoined, The reason is that I love thee for thine exceeding loveliness and thy surpassing beauty. And if thou wilt but grant me my desire of thy body, I will advance thee yet farther in honor and favor and largesse, and I will make thee wazir for all thy tender age, even as the folk made me sultan over them, and I no older than thou. So that nowadays there is nothing strange when children take the head, and by Allah, he was a gifted man who said, it seems as though of Lot's tribe were our days, and crave with love to advance the young in years. When Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, he was abashed, and his cheeks flushed till they seemed to flame, and he said, I need not these favors which lead to the commission of sin. I will live poor in wealth, but wealthy in virtue and honor. Quoth she, I am not to be duped by thy scruples, arising from prudery and coquettish ways. And Allah bless him who saith, to him I spake of coupling, but he said to me, how long this noyous long persistency? But when gold piece I showed him, he cried, who from the Almighty Sovereign e'er shall flee? Now when Kamar al-Zaman heard these words and understood her verses and their import, he said, O king, I have not the habit of those doings, nor have I strength to bear these heavy burdens, for which elders than I have proved unable. Then how will it be with me in my tender age? But she smiled at his speech and retorted, indeed, it is a matter right marvelous how error springeth from the disorder of man's intendment. Since thou art a boy, why standest thou in fear of sin, or on the doing of things forbidden, seeing that thou art not yet come to years of canonical promises and responsibilities, and the offences of a child incur neither punishment nor reproof? Verily, thou hast committed thyself to a quibble for the sake of contention, and it is thy duty to bow before a proposal of fruition. So henceforward cease from denial and coyishness, for the commandment of Allah is a decree foreordained. Indeed, I have more reasons than thou to fear failing by sin to be misled, and well inspired who he would say, my prickle is big, and the little one said, thus boldly in vitals with lion-like stroke. Then 'tis a sin, and he no sin to me, so I had him at once with a counterfeit poke. When Kamar al-Zaman heard these words, the light became darkness in his sight, and he said, O king, thou hast in thy household fair women and female slaves, who have not their like in this age. Shall not these suffice thee without me? Do thou will with them, and let me go. She replied, thou sayest sooth, but it is not with them that one who loveth thee can heal himself of torment, and can abate his fever. For when tastes and inclinations are corrupted by vice, they hear and obey other than good advice. So leave arguing, and listen to what the poet saith. Seest not the bazaar with its fruits in row? These men are for the figs, and for sycamores those. And what another saith, many, whose anklet rings are dumb, have tinkling belts, and this hath all content, while that for want must wail. Thou biddest me a fool, and quit thee for her charms. Allah forfend, I leave the faith, turn infidel. Nay, by thy rights of side beard mocking all her curls, not mott nor maid from thee my heart shall spell. And yet another, O beauty's union, love for these my creed, free choice of faith, and eke my best desire. Women I have forsworn for thee, so may deem me all men this day a shaveling friar. And yet another, even not beardless one with girl nor heed, the spy who saith to thee, 'tis an amiss. Far different is the girl whose feet one kisses, and that gazelle whose feet the earth must kiss. And yet another, a boy of twice 10 is fit for a king. And yet another, my soul, thy sacrifice I choose thee out, who art not menstruous nor operious, but I say with women male I should beget, brats till the wide, wide world grew straight for us. And yet another, quoth she, for I lie with her forbore, O folly, following fool, O fool to core, if thou my coin for Kibla to thy coignet reject, will show thee what shall please thee more. When Kamar al-Zaman heard her quote this poetry and was certified that there was no escaping compliance with what willed she had said, O king of the age, if thou must needs have it so, make covenant with me that thou wilt do this thing with me but once, though it avail not to correct thy depraved appetite, and that thou wilt never again require this thing of me to the end of time, so perchance shall Allah purge me of the sin. She replied, I promise thee this same, hoping that Allah of his favor will relent towards us and blot out our mortal offense, for the girdle of heaven's forgiveness is not indeed so strait, but it may compass us around and absolve us from the excess of our heinous sins, and bring us to the light of salvation out of the darkness of error. And indeed, excellency, well saith the poet, of evil thing the folk suspect us twain, and to this thought their hearts and souls are bent. Come, dear, let's justify and free their souls that wrong us one good bout, and then repent. Thereupon she made with him an agreement and a covenant, and swore a solemn oath by him who is self-existent, that this thing should befall betwixt them but once and never again for all time, and that the desire of him was driving her to death and perdition. So he rose up with her on this condition, and went with her to her own boudoir, and there she might quench the low of her lust, saying, There is no majesty and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. This is the fated decree of the all-powerful and the all-wise. And he doffed his bagged trousers, shameful and abashed, with tears running from his eyes for the stress of affright. Thereat she smiled, and making him mount upon a couch with her, said to him, After this night thou shalt see naught that will offend thee. Then she turned to him, bussing and boosting him, and bending calf over calf, and said to him, Put thy hand between my thighs to the accustomed place, so happily it may stand up to prayer after prostration. He wept, and he cried, I am not good at aught at this. But she said, By my life, an thou do as I bid thee, it shall profit thee. So he put out his hand with vitals afire for confusion, and found her thighs cooler than cream and softer than silk. The touching of them pleasured him, and he moved his hand hither and thither till it came to a dome abounding in good gifts and movements and shifts, and said to himself, Perhaps this king is a hermaphrodite, neither man nor woman quite. So he said to her, O king, I cannot find that thou hast a tool like the tools of men. What then moved thee to do this deed? And loudly laughing, Queen Budur till she fell on her back, and said, O my darling, how quickly thou hast forgotten the nights we have lain together. Then she made herself known to him, and he knew her for his wife, the Lady Budur, daughter of King Al-Ghayr, lord of the isles and the seas. So he embraced her, and she embraced him, and he kissed her, and she kissed him. Then they lay down on the bed of pleasure, voluptuous, repeating the words of the poet. When his softly bending shape bid him close to my embrace, which clipped him all about like the tendrils of the vine, and shed a flood of softness on the hardness of his heart, he yielded, though at first he was minded to decline, and dreading lest the railer's eye should light upon his form, came a mount with the caution to baffle his design. His waist makes moans of hindered cheeks that weigh upon his feet, like heavy load of merchandise upon young camel lean. Girt with his glances scimitar, which seemed athirst for blood, and clad in mail of dusky curls that showed the sheenest shine. His fragrance wafted happy news of footsteps coming nigh, and to him, like a bird uncaged, I flew in straightest line. I spread my cheek upon his path, beneath his sandal shoon, and lo, of the dust healed all my hurt divine. With one embrace again I bound the banner of our loves, and loosed the knot of my delight that bound in bonds malign. Then bade I make high festival, and straight came flocking in pure joys that know not grizzled age, nor aught of pain and pine. The full moon dotted with the stars the lips and pearly teeth that danced right joyously upon the bubbling face of wine. So in the prayer niche of their joys I yielded me to what would make the humblest penitent of sinner most indign. I swear by all the signs of those glories in his face, I'll ne'er forget the chapter entitled Al-Ikhlas. Then Queen Budur told Kamar al-Zaman all that had befallen her from beginning to end, and he did likewise, after which she began to upbraid his saying, "What moved thee to deal with me as thou hast done this night?" She replied, "Pardon me, for I did this by way of jest, that pleasure and gladness might be increased." And when dawned the morn, and day arose with its sheen and shone, she sent to King Amanus, sire of the lady Hayat al-Nufus, and acquainted him with the truth of the case, and that she was wife to Kamar al-Zaman. Moreover, she told him their tale and the cause of their separation, and how his daughter was a virgin, pure as when she was born. He marveled at their story with exceeding marvel, and bade them chronicle it in letters of gold. Then he turned to Kamar al-Zaman and said, "O king's son, art thou minded to become my son-in-law by marrying my daughter?" Replied he, "I must consult the Queen Budur, as she hath a claim upon me for benefits without stint." And when he took counsel with her, and she said, "Right is thy recking. Marry her, and I will be her handmaid, for I am a debtor for kindness and favor, and in good offices and obligations manifold, especially as we were here in her place, and as the king her father hath whelmed us with the benefits." Now when he saw that she inclined to this, and was not jealous of Hayat al-Nufus, he agreed with her upon this matter. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And so do I cease my tale for the day, until it be morrow.